speak directly into it? Yep, we can hear you okay. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
So help me God, yes.
Mr. Jorde, please state your name.
Sherri Webb, it's Cheryl. Hanson is the maiden name, Webb.
And Ms. Webb, do you owner have an interest in property that is being targeted by the proposed Summit Hazardous Pipeline?
Yes, sir.
And how many parcels?
Just one.
And I understand you and your sister have ownership interest in that parcel, is that correct?
It's actually two sisters, a brother.
Okay, so you're four siblings,
yes,
including yourself.
Yes.
Very good. And which county is that in?
Shelby.
And I understand also you have caused to be pre-filed testimony in this matter, along with a series of attachments and exhibits. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was filed as a 4 of us testimony.
All right, on behalf of the 4 siblings who are the owners, correct?
That's correct.
And I understand that you and your sister, Cynthia Hanson, have divided up the testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what are the areas of the testimony you're prepared to speak about?
Anything but health and safety. She's a critical care nurse, and she knows the safety part better than I do.
Okay, so you're kind of the everything else person.
Yes.
Very good. If we were to walk through, ma'am, your pre-filed testimony and all the answers you gave there, would the answers you would provide me here to those same questions be substantially similar?
Yes, sir.
And can you think of any material updates or corrections that are important for the IUB to know at this time?
Yes, there are corrections. On page 49, it is line 5, if you want to count it. It says something to the effect of, and then pocket billions of dollars in tax credits is nothing but fair. It should say anything but fair.
Okay.
And of course, this is all towards the end of my pre-file testimony because it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning. Towards the bottom of the page, it's not a mathematical error. It was the way it was worded. 46,400 tons per acre per year should be 46,400 tons per 8,000 acres per year. That's soil loss.
Okay, thank you.
And then one more. It's just a tiny one, but I taught English, and this little one drives me crazy. There's a random 3 on that page. It is midway down, beyond attachment number 42 in bold. It's like 2 or 3 lines below that. It says when it is 3 conservative. I'm not sure where the 3 came from. Just because I'm a perfectionist.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, with that, we would offer exhibits 348 through 360, 591, 592, and 615.
Further objections?
There are, Your Honor. We have no objections to the bulk of it, but we do need to object to 615. As the board is likely aware, we got notice of that from EFS literally walking in this morning. I looked at it. It's in 5 parts. It's 153 pages long. This witness pre-filed 576 pages. It seems excessive, and simply supplementing the direct testimony to file 153 pages. Frankly, having been in the hearing, we haven't even had an opportunity to determine if it's objectionable. There just simply has to be a limit on dropping 153 pages of a direct witness on the morning of testimony. I've skimmed through it. From what I can see, virtually all of it is pictures of land that presumably existed prior to July 24th. It's documents that existed. It's knowledge that was known or knownable prior to July 24th. We cannot have more than 2 months after that deadline, 153 pages of new material on the morning of a witness. That is absolutely objectionable.
Mr. Jorde.
I'm not aware of any page limit anywhere. Their prior objections have been, well, you should have, included all of this. There should have been more pre-filed testimony if you wanted to talk about these things. So we're giving them what they've asked for. There is no page limit. I didn't hear an objection other than this landowner has too much good information to share, which I don't think is a reasonable objection. So we'd stand on our offer.
Yeah, there absolutely should have been more direct testimony by July 24th when the board very clearly made the deadline. This is just wildly inappropriate.
You have one final comment on that, Mr. Jorde?
Yeah, up until this moment, which I'm losing track if we're in week 7 or week 8 of this process, there have been hearing exhibits brought by non-Jorde landowners, other people the day of the hearing in mid-testimony, and those have been thankfully copied by staff and sent around, and there hasn't been a problem. So again, this is nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever, and I don't know, I just find it interesting that this objection's coming up now, and still isn't a specific objection to any item, any one single page.
It's because we haven't had time to look at them. Your Honor, as you know, we have occasionally objected on this basis. We, trying to be cooperative, trying to help move things along, have not raised it every time it's applicable. But this one is just a bridge too far.
Ms. Colas, you have your card up.
Yes, I think it should be entered. I had one business day to get information from eminent domain notice and another one that I received afterwards. She went to all this effort to provide this information because she felt it was necessary for the board to make a proper decision concerning it, and I think it should be allowed.
And Your Honor, she is represented by counsel, so that's different than a non-represented layperson. It's her counsel who should know better than to try this.
Ms. Colas, just to clarify, the objection is not to the witness. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dublinski. I just want to clarify for Ms. Colas that for the non-attorneys, Mr. Dublinski is objecting to the attorney overseeing this process.
Does that mean I don't have a place?
No, it means I just want to clarify for the witness. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dublinski, your objection is not pointed at the witness.
Yes, it is.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
thank you. Okay,
Could I say something?
no.
Glad it's a hearing.
Objection is noted. We will admit the evidence and give it the weight due, and strongly encourage the parties to work with one another on submitting their evidence a little more promptly. Go ahead, Mr. Jorde. I apologize, ma'am. We were just sorting out the evidentiary submission, so I appreciate it.
I
Go ahead,
understand.
Mr. Jorde.
Thank you. Okay, ma'am, with that, all of your evidence is in. the record, and I would tender you for cross-examination questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. Ms. Webb, I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club.
Hi, Wally.
So your 4 siblings own this property in equal shares?
Well, 3 siblings, yes. There's 4 of us. It's equal
Right.
shares. Yes, sir.
4 siblings altogether.
Yes, true.
Is this in a trust, or do you just own it in common, as we say?
We actually formed a corporation a few years ago. Our tax preparers, the 4 different tax preparers, suggested we do that. So it's a corporation.
Okay. And who farms it? Do you have a tenant?
Yes, we do. In fact, he's back there because his wife is testifying today. It's Dave Peters farms it. My grandparents, dressed up in their finest Sunday clothes, went to visit with them and asked him to farm their land.
When and how did you and your siblings first learn about the Summit project?
We received a letter in August of 21. It was a certified letter from a lawyer, an attorney's office in Des Moines. And it started out talking about the project and that there would be meetings.
And did you go to the initial informational meeting?
Yes, we did. My sister and I went to the initial meeting. It was in Harlan, and I have the date on that. Right here. The first letter was 8/27. The meeting letter was 9/13, and then the meeting was 10/6. So it was during harvest season, and it was in the middle of the day. It was noticeable that there were people not there because they were in the fields, and of course they didn't know anything about this.
Did you have an opportunity to talk to any Summit land agents immediately after that meeting?
Actually, we tried to talk before we went into the meeting just to find out what they were doing. They did not have any maps. We were allowed to take pictures with our phone, but none of that made any sense to us. So after the meeting, they had originally said it'd be about an hour. It was more than 3 hours. And the questioning was still going on, and they kind of shut it down. So, no, we didn't stop. She has a 2.5-hour drive home, and I had things to do at home also. So, no, we did not stop to see a land agent on the way out.
So when did you first have any contact with a Summit land agent or Summit representative?
Allison Foster was our first agent, or the first agent we had contact with. She stopped by the house without calling or without any appointment on November 20th of 21. She left survey forms. We had a very short discussion regarding the project because by that time we all had done our research and we were not interested.
So was there any discussion at all with the agent at that time?
Just a little bit. There was mention of if you don't seriously consider this, the eminent domain would be used.
Were you aware of that before then?
Of eminent domain?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I knew what it was, but it hadn't thought about what that possibility was since it was a private company.
Okay. Well, how did you take that comment about eminent domain?
Probably my blood pressure went up a little bit that day. I'm not well. Don't threaten my land, or our land. I should say, if I say my, it's inadvertent. It's our land.
So what happened after that first contact, as far as your next contact with any Summit agent?
She came back in November or in December. It was the middle of the month. She said she was making an initial offer. We told her we were not. I told her we were not interested in signing an easement. We talked about Christmas because that was coming up. She wanted to go home. She was from Texas. And I asked her if they had surveyed yet because we hadn't heard anything. She returned my call later and said they had not surveyed.
Did you get a notice for a survey?
The first time she came to the door was with a survey notice. No, at that time I had not received a notice about a survey. And that's why I wasn't sure what the process was or the procedure was. That's why I asked her if it had been surveyed yet.
Okay. And in that second contact with the agent, was there any discussion about route or easement terms?
No. She said she had an offer. She didn't leave it with any of the paperwork we had. Maybe it's because I, again, reiterated we really weren't interested in signing an easement. It was our grandmother's land. It had been in the family as of this year over 123 years. It's not something we want to give away. It's not something we want ruined. It is no-till. And that is something that our tenant is very proud of. In fact, Shelby County as a whole is 95% no-till because of the less soils that we have in our land, in the entire county. Harrison County and Shelby County, they share that fate of that glacier that came down and blew the soil over hundreds and hundreds of years into our areas. And you have to keep it intact. It'll blow away. It was described yesterday as being friable. It crumbles, and it does crumble. You can make a ball with it, like the Iowa State agronomy professor said, and it just becomes hard as a rock. It's too easily compacted. And consequently, no, we weren't interested in having it ripped up because at this point we have very little erosion.
The fact that it's no-till, is that a specific circumstance that causes you some concern?
Yeah. You do not want to tear up no-till land to put a pipeline in it. First of all, because carbon's released, carbon is stored in the soil. But second of all, when you're looking at tearing up 50 feet or more, because I don't believe they'll stay in their 50-foot easement, you're going to rip the soil up and the microbes that hold it together, as well as the organic matter that's on top that holds it together. You're also going to kill earthworms and anything else that lives down below that when you destroy their home.
Yeah. So back to the summon agents. Did you ever have any further conversations with a summon agent about easement terms or the route of the pipeline?
She called a couple times. Again, it was pleasant. I did apologize one time because I had been kind of short with her. But as far as the actual easement amounts, no. We didn't, and we had not received an offer. And I believe they thought that they had sent us an offer because our tenant received an offer. But we never did get one. We finally got one in October. That was our first offer that we received.
October of last year?
Yes.
And did you respond to that offer?
No.
Can we bring up the KMZ file, please? Does that appear to be your land?
Yes, it is.
And it's just one parcel?
Yes.
Okay. Was that a quarter section? Or?
It's 40 acres, yes, sir.
And it looks like the pipeline route goes vertically or north-south?
North-south.
On the western part of your property, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that the route that you always understood Summit was seeking?
That is the approximate route that every time we receive something from them, it's been in that area. We received one that was a 5th revision not too long ago, so I don't know how many times it's been revised. At one point, the difference between the work area on the two of them was different, and the difference on the acreage. And the difference on the acreage of the easement, the permanent easement, was different. So I'm not sure what they're doing, what they're playing with.
Okay. Is this highly erodible land?
Yes, it is. It is classified HEL, which is highly erodible land.
Okay. And for the record, what does that mean in terms of what you must do in farming the land?
That kind of land in particular, and all of these, I've been watching this since it began in August. I was here the first day and watched it. It all looks like it's flat. It is very far from being flat. Our land has, the lower elevation is to the east, especially where those trees are down there. And then the higher elevation is at the top of that hill between the terraces, between the north 40 and that south 40 that is south of us. The terraces are high also. So it's not flat. You have to use the terraces. You have to use no-till to keep the land in place, and very, very little disking, if any at all.
Okay. Are there any governmental requirements in terms of conservation practices that you have to do?
Those terraces are soil and water conservation terraces, and they, Grandma started talking with them in the late 80s, I believe. They were put in through a series of years, 90 through 92. They've been worked on once since then.
If we could back out a little bit and show more of the area around. Yeah. It looks like there are some structures across the road just north of your property. What is that?
That is a hog confinement.
Okay. I assume that's not yours.
No, it is not ours. In fact, you heard testimony a week or two ago about losing 400 head of hogs. That was the confinement. We had a storm in July that it actually snapped power lines. And the power lines run on the west side of our land all the way north and south. And several of them snapped at the top of that hill, and he lost 400 head in there. So, no, it's not ours, but it is the reason that I did not suggest an alternate route, because his confinement is there. I don't want to get the pipeline too close. I do not want to push it off on our neighbors, although I would love to. Silver Creek is to the right, it's to the east.
Is that, pardon me, is that what runs basically north and south?
Yeah, it runs north and south. It's a creek. The water is crystal clear, and there's algae on top of it. You can't tell that, but right now the water is crystal clear. It's important. We don't pollute the water, and then we also have that clump of trees down there that we have bats and monarchs that migrate through there.
Okay. Are the trees on the southeast?
They're more to the south, not quite in the middle, and on the east side. Yes, okay. We are actually talking about maybe some CRP with that.
Okay. Does that hog confinement or some other facility apply its manure to your property?
Yes, under DNR regulations, yes. If you pull it back a little bit farther to the north and the east, you don't have to go that far. You can see it right there. You can see to the north and the east, there's another hog confinement. So in the case of a rupture, the possibility of 2 confinements being affected, and with each one of them containing probably $500,000 in hogs, we could be looking at $1 million in hog alone. And I don't think you can put a price on a human life that would be working in there. And if you could put a price on that, you couldn't put a price on the mental health issues our family would have in case someone would die in there. I don't think we could handle that.
So back to your contacts with the Summit agents. When was the last time you had any contact with them?
The last time we had contact was not with an agent, but we crashed the safety party in Denison. We were not notified of it, just as everybody else has mentioned it, including Cindy Krudoff last night. That was the last time we had any contact with them. They would still like us to sign, of course. They won't answer our questions when it comes to safety, plume, the dispersion. They won't commit to any well issues for neighbors that we have that have well questions. And the fact is there's not much of a distance between the confinement and the pipeline.
Did you ever have any contact with Summit representatives at any county supervisor meetings?
Yes. They have come to several supervisor meetings. They haven't been there lately because they found out they owed Shelby County a lot of money due to fines not being paid because they didn't follow the permit process due to the ordinance that had been passed last year. Consequently, so they will catch you outside and ask you if you're interested in signing. I don't see anything that is voluntary about this. In fact, I actually know a couple of people in Shelby County that are sorry that they signed, and I can't tell you their names because they're fearful of repercussions. But they're sorry they signed. They didn't know enough.
Have you undertaken to learn about the economic and environmental impacts of this project?
Yes. Our land would be devalued, definitely devalued. We're looking at probably 25% at this point because there's not a pipeline in it. The proposed pipeline has been the talk of Shelby County. There was land for sale south of here, of this area. The parcel that had the easement that was signed went for less money than the parcel across the road from it that didn't have one. As far as the endangered part or the environmental part, the loss of soil would be huge, absolutely huge. It's bad enough the way it is. It's 5.8 tons per acre per year, but it would even be worse because we have the slopes and we have the terraces they would cut. One terrace, for sure, the possibility exists depending on that line that they could cut one terrace twice and one terrace once. Just opening that terrace up is going to be a real issue. First of all, because when you pack it back in, the terrace has to be packed, but the pipeline will not be packed, more than likely. They'll just dump the dirt in there. So you have the possibility in a few years of a washout. I can't believe it's a temporary easement either. Why is it temporary for 2 years? Why is it going to be a road back and forth? Because the road to the south of that 40 that is south of us is a B road. So I just see our land and everybody else's just being a construction road. They're just going to stay on it. They're not going to go on the gravel road with it.
So what do you understand Summit would use for access to your property if the pipeline were there?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how they're going to access it because the area to the west of the proposed pipeline is an easement for rural electric. The line, you can see the power lines probably if you get up really close to it. You can see the power lines, and that's where they snapped in July. There's also an access for the farmer to the south to get to his land. I would hope that they would not block his land. So I'm assuming they're going to have to put in some kind of an access and try and do it within 50 feet, which is all that would be allowed, besides the pipeline of 50 feet. The worry is the compaction, driving over that and over that and over that for 2 years. If it's a temporary 2-year thing, I shudder to think trying to farm that afterwards. Not really sure Iowa's #1 in the nation for soil loss. Do we want to just keep doing this? Because Summit has proposed 8,000 acres of pipe to be affected by pipeline. That's a lot of soil that will be gone, and for years, not just 1 year, it's every year, and it's not sustainable. It takes a year to rebuild. It's 0.24 tons of acre per year. That's it. You're losing 5.8 tons, but you're only getting 0.24 back in a year's time. It's not sustainable. Eventually we'll have no decent soil to grow a crop.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Ms. Coles?
Good morning, Ms. Webb.
Good morning, Ms. Coles.
You brought up your easement pertaining to electric. Can you please show me where that is on the KMZ map?
Yep. Oh, they have to put it up for me. Thank you. This right here, all the way south. Oh, God, I should hold it up. So all the way along that line are the power lines. The easement is right to, well, it's basically right past that fence. There's a fence there. I think the farmer to the west of us runs cattle in there after he picks his corn or his beans. So that is the problem right there, is the access. They will also have to bore under the road. Nothing has been mentioned about that. You know, in Iowa, the farmer owns the middle up to the middle of the road. So I know they'll do the road permit issue with the county, but our ditches are heavily grassed to prevent soil erosion, and if they start digging that up, we're going to have a real issue with soil erosion. And we have an intake because there is tile on that land. We have an intake to the east. I'm not sure you can see it from here. I included it in pictures that, yes, I did submit late, sorry. But we were not given much notice of this being moved from October to August. So there's an intake down there, and that work was just done a few years ago, and I'm worried about the erosion from the west side washing down into that intake and clogging it.
Can you show me with your pointer where that's at and describe it directionally west and south, and et cetera?
Okay, so it's more towards the center. It's approximately in that area, somewhere in that area, right there, which is pretty much center on the north side. If you can find the attachments, there's pictures of the intake, and it's heavily grassed around that area too to prevent erosion and soil clogging up that intake.
You're very concerned about the creek or going through there and erosion and the damage it might do to a possible pipeline.
Right, Silver Creek is not on our land. It's over here. The bridge is there, which has a weight limit on it. But it is crystal clear, and I do believe that some farmers probably use that for cattle down south of us or north of us.
You're very concerned about the damage. I believe you're very concerned about the damage to your terracing.
Yes, I am. Very much so. You know, when terracing first started years and years and years ago, people questioned whether or not that would be really effective, but it has been very effective. We had our land droned last year without a crop on it, so you can see And I asked the person that was running the drone very specifically to catch the terraces, to catch the land, to catch the confinement across the road, and to make sure that it was visible whether or not we had erosion. And there's very little erosion there because of the no-till practices and the terraces.
Have you attempted to get liability insurance?
Well, we have liability insurance, but when we asked about liability for the possibility of a rupture with a CO2 pipeline, that is considered a pollutant. So we asked if we could buy additional liability insurance, and the answer was no.
Do you think this is for the public benefit or use?
The only public benefit I see out of this is extremely short term during construction. And it would be so short that it wouldn't be worth it. I'm not sure that I know there's no public benefit as far as I'm concerned. As far as our land is concerned, there's definitely no benefit. It's going to tear it up. I use the term rape because that's what they're going to do. They're going to rape our land by putting that pipeline in it.
Do you depend on the income from your farm?
We do depend on the income to a degree. There's 4 of us, so when you split rent 4 ways, it doesn't go very far. But it does pay the taxes, and it does pay the insurance, and it does give us a little extra.
Are you concerned about the water usage? You mentioned the confinements and that.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize. I knew what they had told Minnesota, which was 59,000 gallons of water a day. We were not able to ever get an answer when we went to meetings to find out what it would be. So on June 9th, I wrote an objection to the IUB regarding the lack of knowledge about the water that Summit would need. There were 13 permits applied for just recently. If you take a total of that, it's an estimated 478 billion, 296,000 gallons per year. If ethanol plants grow by 25%, which is what was reported by Bruce Rastetter at the American Alliance event on 8/14 of this year, then an additional 119,574,000 gallons would be needed, besides the first amount. Ethanol plants already use 3.5 gallons to create 1 gallon of ethanol. So last year, the 4.5 billion gallons of ethanol, which was a record, needed 15.75 billion gallons of water. I can't stand that kind of water usage right now. Every Thursday, the drought map is updated in Iowa. Ida is already severe, Wright severe extreme, Green moderate at this point, Chickasaw extreme, Cherokee, moderate, Cerro Gordo extreme, Plymouth moderate, Mitchell extreme, Page Fremont abnormal to moderate, Sioux moderate, Hardin severe, Dickinson moderate, and Story is abnormal to moderate. Most of those counties are in extreme drought. It could get to the point where, are we going to make ethanol, or are we going to let our kids go to school and have water that day? Already some cities are saying you can't water your lawns, you can't water your gardens, and a lot of rural water wells are drying up. They're either going to have to drill deeper, or they're going to have to drill a new one, or they're going to have to try and tie on, and rural water in some areas is not taking on any new customers. This is a 3rd year of drought, and it doesn't look any better for next year the way it sounds.
So it's a private for-profit company versus the well-being and livelihood of the Midwest farmers along this pipeline?
Yes, it is. It's a private company for private gain.
They could do irreparable damage to the farm economy.
Yes, just by ruining the soil, or the topsoil loss of 5.8 tons of soil per year.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
You, ma'am.
Ms. Kaufman, and then Ms.
Good morning, Ms. Webb. I'm Julie Kaufman, also from Shelby County. I was going to ask you about the state. Well, I know that Cindy's going to talk mostly about safety, but do you have concern that this is that the board should be considering not just our Iowa land, but this project as a whole affecting all of the U.S.? Do you think that there's a concern about, like, the water usage affecting so much of our nation?
Water usage is a huge
Objection,
issue.
Your Honor. State the objection.
I think the question of, what are the impacts not only beyond this landowner's land, but for the nation as a whole, are certainly beyond the scope of direct. And I know we've tried to focus this hearing on impacts to the landowner witnesses.
Ms. Kaufman can give a response.
Well, I wonder about the Google Maps and all. We all are aware of that, and that it does affect. But I'm just asking about, do you believe that this is a concern for definitely Iowa, but is there a larger concern for?
Sorry, I meant, do you have a response to Mr. Dubinsky's objection that the question is out of scope of the testimony?
Well, if it's used for eminent domain and Iowa is part of this country, it does affect the whole country.
So
that's beyond the jurisdiction of the board, however.
Okay, so the objection is that your question exceeds the scope of the pre-filed
Okay,
testimony.
I understand what you're saying. We're just going to...
You can rephrase it.
Are you concerned about Crystal Creek and water pollution?
Crystal Creek or Silver Creek?
Oh, excuse me, I thought
Silver Creek. Yes,
okay.
I am very concerned about that. Yes, like I said, the water is crystal clear underneath that algae. It is pure as can be, and very cold this time of year, considering it was 90 degrees last week, so it's already cold. But yes, I am concerned about any kind of water pollution. Is a concern for anyone in this nation. Water is eventually, if it has not already started, to become a huge issue. Look at the West Coast. They already have huge water issues on that side. And I think with the drought that the Midwest has been experiencing, it's just going to get worse for us too. A well on a farm is important. And if it's already drying up, then what do you do next? Do you drill deeper? Or do you try and find another source of water? And especially if you have livestock, it's tough.
In the event of a potential accident where a pipeline could rupture, are you aware that CO2 when mixed with water can form carbonic acid?
Yes, I am. I'm aware of that. It also can lower the pH of the soil. Besides freeze the soil, it's 70 below zero. At the site of the rupture, or where the carbon dioxide would stay, the microbes would be dead, the earthworms would be dead. Anything living in that soil within a certain degree of area, depending on the rupture, would be dead. And the soil, it would, after talking to an Iowa State agronomist, he could not commit to how long it would take before that soil would become productive again. He said rain would be the big thing, but we can't depend on that right now. I mean, we were very grateful for whatever rain we got, and we did get some last night, but we've had 3 years of this spotty rain.
So, because I would just like to ask if you, since Iowa is included in what we call the breadbasket of the world, do you think this could impact a greater region than just Iowa?
I agree with that. I do believe it would impact a greater region. The fact is that there's going to be land taken out of production for the development of this pipeline, for the putting it in, if it happens. Then you're going to look at reduced yields for at least 6 years. That's minimum. We're only getting paid for 3 of those. And then you're looking at the increased possibility of increased soil loss, because no-till doesn't happen overnight. You can't get back to that status of no-till overnight. It takes years for that. So there's going to be continued erosion, continued issues with drought, the way it looks, at least for another year, that's the possibility of another drought year. And yeah, I think the fact is reduced crop yields means less food, whether it's for humans or for animals, and in reality, less corn for the ethanol plants.
If this project is approved for eminent domain, do you foresee that it's possible that other pipeline companies could also try to make more pipelines in Iowa?
Objection.
State the objection.
Calls for legal conclusion.
Ms. Kaufman, you want to respond to his objection? Or you?
I'm just trying to
so you can
ask if...
Yes, I'm just going to walk you through it. And look, to be frank, I think the non-attorneys in the room have adapted very well to this weird dance that the attorneys do as we go through the hearing process. For whatever reason, I think there's a lot of people that came to this with the idea that this was a very legislative style hearing with free-flowing conversations, and it's not. It's a hearing. It's a very regulated, very controlled, with lots of rules and procedures on when things can be filed and how they're filed. And so when we're walking through pre-filed testimony and cross and redirect, when they object, you can address his objection, or you can just move on with your question, rephrase your question, whatever you want. That said, I think the non-attorneys have adapted quite well, and so...
Could you state your objection again, please?
Yes, the question calls for a legal conclusion about other pipelines getting eminent domain.
All right, let me restate it. Do you foresee that if eminent domain is used for this project, do you believe eminent domain could be used by other companies that might want somebody else's private property?
If you open the door to eminent domain being used for a private company, there will be no turning back. You can't refuse another company eminent domain for a private gain since you've already granted it. It's a Pandora's box. It would be a real problem. If I owned a business or land in Iowa and this happened, which I do own land in Iowa, I would be seriously worried about what the next thing would be down the road that they'd want, because the precedent has been set.
So do I understand that you are worried about Iowa's private property rights for everyone?
Yes, I am very worried about it. We have the right to own land, and our rights are being threatened.
And are you also aware that private property rights are in our U.S. Constitution and in our Iowa Constitution?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Ms. Hike. Ms. Webb, if you want to move your microphone around, you are certainly welcome to.
Hello, Mrs. Webb. I'm Chris Hike. I'm a landowner.
Hello, Ms. Hike.
Hello. Do you have tile running
Yes.
through your property?
We do have tile. It was installed in 1984, and then there was some new work a couple years ago near the intake. The grandma had talked about wet areas. She journaled quite extensively, so that's our records. Thank God she journaled. But there are no maps. The person that installed the tile is dead. He passed away last year, so I have no maps. Our renter has a pretty good idea of where they're at, and he did draw what he thought was pretty close to where they're at. That was an attachment, so it's there. And we also have rural water going through our land. They will, if that route stays the same, they will run into rural water lines. And I have no idea how old that is. The easement agreements would probably show that. But the big issue is I don't know that there's sensors in it. It might be that old that there's no sensors.
Ms. Webb, do you believe that Summit's contractors would repair damaged tile to as good or better condition than if it's ever broken?
When you've had tile as long as we've had tile, I can't believe you're going to tie into it without issues. My brother is an agronomist. He doesn't farm, but he does help his neighbor farm a little bit, and he also drills wells for a living. He's geothermal, and his knowledge of the soils in Iowa is extensive because he has drilled through everything. And he says disturbing tile is a real issue because the water has formed its little path to go, whether it's on top or underneath. And so consequently, when you interrupt those little paths to that tile, then you've interrupted the soil also. So to repair it and try and tie it in and then make sure that those little paths are there is not possible. It is the same thing as trying to restore no-till land. It cannot be done. The only one that could restore that land is God.
And my final question, do you think Summit's proposed carbon capture pipeline is the only option to keep an Iowa's ethanol industry thriving?
No, I do not. First of all, corn was a commodity well before ethanol plants. And I put ethanol in my car. I drive my truck with ethanol in it, so I have nothing against ethanol. But the idea that the only way we can save ethanol is to put a pipeline in the ground and pipe this stuff to who knows where because they don't have a place to put it. It's like fantasy. The first time I read the letter, it was a fantasy. It's like, this, you got to be kidding me. My research on this has been well over 1,000 hours. I have spent endless hours on this, way too many. But just as Mr. Tronchetti said a little bit ago, there are many, many ways that you can use CO2. Denison has carbonic something, continental carbonic. They make dry ice with it for dry ice, for storing, packaging, whatever, and for dry ice blasting. There are ethanol plants that are using it for baking powder. There are a number of ways that can be used, and more technology is out there. I truly believe that these pipelines will be obsolete in a few years. MIT introduced this whole idea years and years ago. They have actually archived the original pages because they continue to work on new methods which do not require pipelines whatsoever. And it can be done at the plant site. The plant can collect the 45Zs.
What is the acronym that MIT?
MIT is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I think that's what it is. MIT is known for their technology and for their unbelievable scientific staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Webb.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I believe Board Member Birds has some questions.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. You brought up some different points I think are interesting. I'd just like to ask you a couple more questions on. So with your siblings, so is this all your acres on this parcel, or do you have more than just this?
Many years ago, our grandmother had 80 acres. When she passed, it was to be shared with my dad and my aunt. My aunt threatened partitioning because she wanted her half. We fought it for quite a while, and then when she was seriously considering it and hired an attorney, we had to give in. We had to share it, so to speak, and divide it. So consequently, the South 40 she sold. She would not even entertain an offer from us. Pretty sad because it's a century farm, and it has been in our family for quite a while. Our grandmother was given this land. First of all, was a huge surprise because in those years, women did not get land. It went to the men. And so consequently, they get China or cash or whatever the case may be. I think giving her the land validated her as a person. So consequently, yes, we share this only 40 acres now and it's the four of us.
And so then the parcel directly to the south of this, you're saying, used to be part of your family's land?
That was our land, and Grandma referred to it as the 80. Many, many trips were spent going to the 80 to check the crops. Grandpa and my dad farmed that land for as long as they could. My dad eventually got a job in Ankeny with the Ankeny Research Farm, which was Iowa State. And my grandfather farmed it as long as he could too, but when he got to the point where there were some real health issues, in 1984 they asked Dave Peters to farm it for him. And they asked Dave for a reason, because he took care of his land. He's a good steward.
And so the proposed pipeline goes through that south portion.
Yes.
And I don't know if you had stated earlier or not, but did that landowner sign on or not?
He did sign, and he signed on very early.
Okay.
The land to the north is Dave Peters' land.
Did not sign, correct? That's what
And
you're talking about.
And he has not signed
earlier.
either.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Thank
here
you.
today.
Back to your comment about soil loss. So I think you made a statement that the state of Iowa is number 1 for soil loss.
Yes, sir.
And what would you say is the contributing factor to that soil loss? What puts us in that ranking?
Well, originally, not understanding the no-till part. I mean, nobody did. My dad plowed every spring. He disked, he harrowed. Then he'd put the crops in, and then he'd cultivate. And this was before cabs, tractors with cabs or whatever. I mean, it was, back then, farming was definitely, from March on, a hands-on operation. And they had no the sprayers weren't huge. Well, they didn't have sprayers. Most of it was, we walked bean fields for 25 cents an hour. And I've got the cuts on my leg from corn knives to show it. I think part of it is we have rolling hills, we have slopes. We didn't understand the fact that we needed to take care of that. And it's not anything that we didn't, because we didn't know. It's not, you can't really point a finger at anybody. Now, if they're not no-till, then maybe you can point a finger at them. But that is the case. And it's not only caused problems for Iowa, but that land ends up going down the Mississippi or down the Missouri and into the Gulf of Mexico. And the nitrate levels down there are ridiculously high. And at some points, because the last 3 years have not been a big issue because we've had a drought. But now they're talking about the salt water in the Gulf moving up into the Mississippi because the Gulf is higher than the Mississippi at this point. So there's an issue with the salt water moving north. We need to be really careful about how much land we destroy with anything, even the building and whatever. But this in particular is tearing up a lot of land. I just rounded it off. It's actually more than 8,000 acres, but 8,000 acres times 5.8 tons per year is a lot of land. And you can't, 0.24 builds up in a year's time. It's not sustainable.
And then you also made a comment early on. You said something when you were talking about the ownership structure. You said 4 siblings and equal shares. And I think you said your accountant asked you or said it'd be a good idea to form a corporation.
Yes, because before then we were just dividing the rent in fourths, dividing the insurance bill in fourths, the taxes in force, and our accountants were going ballistic. So they recommended that we do something different.
Okay, so for more of like a...
We formed a corporation.
Organizational,
yes.
Cleaning things up purpose.
Yep.
And then just kind of along that line of finances and farming, and so would you consider farming a private for-profit or not?
Pardon me?
Would you consider farming a private for-profit?
I guess I don't understand your question, Mr. Burns.
Is it a private for-profit?
Oh,
business?
Our corporation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I probably didn't ask it.
Not
Wait,
enough
what?
coffee this morning, I think.
I think that's all the clarification I had, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Jorde for redirect.
Yes, thank you. What's the name of your entity that owns this ground, the one you formed?
It is Grandma Frida Butker Hansen's 40.
Does that, is it an Inc. corporation?
It's a incorporation, yeah.
And does Grandma Frida's entity, do you have the power of eminent domain to take land from others to make profits?
No.
Oh, okay. In terms of the time you've spent on this, you've spent over 1,000 hours, is that right?
Actually, I was pretty close to that, yeah. I started immediately after receiving the letter in August. Meetings, legislative days, rally days, etc., 516 hours minimum. I have 263 bookmarks or favorites on my computer, which ended up being printed as 10 pages. As of today, I have put 7,528 miles on my poor little pickup. So the time is a big issue, and mainly because I have a husband that has Alzheimer's. And so instead of spending quality time with him, I'm here. I'm in Des Moines. I'm in Harlan. I am wherever I need to be to protect my grandmother's land. Because if she could be here, she would. And my dad would be here sitting right next to her. I lost 2 dogs last year because they were older. Granted, that's not a big deal. But it is a big deal because it's quality time with them that I haven't had because of this. I have met a lot of very nice people. So I guess God puts that in front of us so we make new friends and we meet a lot of nice people. But I would rather not have gone through any of this.
And you've invested all of that time because you believe it's necessary to protect your land, protect your values against this property grab?
Yes. My grandmother did not protest the electric lines going in. She did not protest the water lines going in because those were necessary. Those are things that people need. And in fact, she was really glad that the rural water was finally starting to take off. But in my heart, I know this is something that she would not want. Her land meant everything to her. It was heritage. It was a legacy. Unless you farmed, unless you've grown up on a farm, you don't understand. You can't understand. It's in your blood. Literally, you don't eat dirt on purpose, but you do get it because you're combining or you're making hay or you're planting or whatever the case may be. Grandmother's life was not an easy life. When she went to school, she still spoke German. She had her hands slapped in class. There was no ESL classes back then, so she worked really, really hard to learn the English language. She lost a child, a baby. She preserved. Probably one of the happiest days of her life, she told me, was when she could throw away the icebox because they could afford a refrigerator. I can't even imagine working as hard as they did to do what they've done with this land. They had other land. Highway 59 went through it. They pulled eminent domain on them, so she'd already gone through this kind of a fight with Highway 59. It separated their land in half in Harlan. So when they sold to the school. The high school is now on what their farmland was in Harlan. This is the only land they kept because it meant so much to her. It's over 100 years old, which I've stated a number of times. And so consequently, we are fighting with everything we've got to hold on to this land and avoid what they want to do to it.
You had mentioned Highway 59, and that taking would have been by the government for public use of transportation.
Yes, that was eminent domain. they didn't fight it that hard because they understood it, but it sure separated their land. It was hard to get to it with equipment and whatever from then on.
And then they sold additional land to the public school system.
The public school system went to them because they were on the edge of town. It was an ideal situation for the school. The school allowed them to live there until they both passed away. And thankfully somebody bought the house and moved it. So the house is still in Harlan.
You were asked a couple questions about surveying, and to be clear, neither you nor your other 3 siblings ever gave Summit permission to survey, did you?
No, we received a certified well, first of all, it was a certified letter. That was all it was. The carrier signed for it. Unfortunately, during COVID, the carriers were allowed to sign for those. They didn't have to knock on the door and get a signature. COVID restrictions have passed, but I think some of the carriers still think it's okay to sign. So it was just a certified letter, and I responded that you do not have permission to be on our land. Then we got March 15th of 2022, we received a certified restricted letter, which is the proper way to do it. The carrier again signed for it. And consequently, when I found out about it, I was extremely angry because it's Grandma Frida Bucker Hanson's. It's not Sherri Webb. It's not John Webb. So she should have literally come to the house and asked to see something with our corporation's name on it that showed me as a manager. And she didn't. She signed for it. I took it back to the post office. I said, I'm refusing this. I have the tracking information from the post office regarding that letter. I knew what it was. I emailed Summit. I said, you do not have permission to survey. They did it anyway. I got a text from our tenant, and I will always call him a neighbor because he is, in April, that said, pipeline people are walking the pipeline again, 5 cars, 2 people in each car.
Okay, so the gist of the point there is that if they surveyed, and I believe their testimony is they have all the surveys they need or something close to that, so if presumably they did survey your ground, no one authorized it, and not only that, you specifically told them not to. They didn't respect you. They did it anyway.
That's right. That is correct.
And you're fearful that the same attitude is just going to continue on and on.
That same attitude has been the one from the very beginning. Our questions were not answered at the very first meeting, and they have not been answered ever since then. The safety issues have never been answered, and they won't answer them because they keep the Homeland Safety option open. I guess they're going to camouflage their valve stations. I have no idea how they're going to keep that from being seen. But water wells, any kind of a setback issue, they don't have to follow that. They have to follow PHMSA. They always come up with the excuses of not answering things. The very first meeting was very frustrating because none of us knew a whole lot about it, but we knew enough to scare us.
When you say first meeting, was that the meeting that you were prevented from participating in, or was there?
No, I was actually allowed to participate in that one. And that was in October in Harlan. We were actually almost stopped in Denison when we went to a meeting because we were handing out information. And we had a meeting in Harlan that over 100 people showed up at, that they wanted more information.
Did you say your ground in question here, your Exhibit H targeted parcel has the loess soil, LOESS? Is that what you said?
HEL is highly erodible land. Yes, that entire acreage, and I did include soil maps.
Okay.
That entire acreage is highly erodible. There is nothing that is not erodible. The topsoil at the bottom is going to be thicker, so to speak, than the topsoil at the top. You'll probably have 3 or 4 inches of topsoil at the top and 12 or more at the bottom, just because that's the way things rolled before no-till.
We touched on the amount of hours and time commitment that you've had to invest in this, and it's true that Summit hasn't offered and hasn't paid to compensate you for that economic loss, have they?
No.
And you were asked about interactions with Summit. Has Summit, either in writing or verbally, ever told you why they cannot go a different route or reroute around your property?
In reality, I wish there was a way to go around that. And no, they have never mentioned an alternate route anyway. But with the confinement, the power lines, and Silver Creek, we're just going to have to take it on the chin, I guess, because there's no other way. We can't run it under the confinement, and I do not want it to go near the creek at all, especially since that one area, they have not done a final determination of that area where the trees are on the southeast side. That is probably a wetland, and it is definitely an area where the bats and the monarchs go. So I don't want it on that side, and I wouldn't put it close to that creek anyway. That would be criminal.
You were asked some questions about whether you believe this proposed project either is or has public benefits, and I think your answer was that some of the temporary jobs, maybe for a short blip, could be a benefit. Was that your testimony?
Yes, that is my testimony, and it would be very short.
Okay, and you're referencing there the jobs from persons, residents of other states that come in for a short time.
Well, they would have to buy food, I assume.
Okay.
But you're right. I have yet to hear anybody say that the surveyors were in any other trucks other than Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and I think one person said there was a Minnesota truck. But I guess Iowa doesn't have any surveyors.
Do you think eminent domain rights and your property rights should be sacrificed so there can be a handful of, in the scheme of things, temporary jobs in Iowa?
No, I do not. The problem with granting eminent domain for a short-time use is not economically feasible, and they obviously, at that point, I would say no one understands the rights of a person to own property.
You were asked some questions about soil loss, and I want to be clear, you're speaking specifically about Iowa being number one in the nation in topsoil loss, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you aware that lack of varied cover crops is one of the top two reasons why there's soil loss?
Yes, and we are talking cover crops for our land too. The problem with cover crops in drought years, they don't come up, or they don't come up very well. So consequently, anyone that had a cover crop last year, unless they planted it early and caught the rains, did not have a real good cover crop.
Would you agree with the premise that if this project is built and if the ethanol plants claim they want to increase their capacity and apparently find corn from somewhere else, that process just continues, kind of this addiction on the corn bean rotation, and will actually lead to further topsoil loss?
Yes, and in fact, I have noticed this year, because I drive around, just like all farmers do, check crops. I've noticed a lot more in the last year or so, corn on corn. In fact, our neighbor went corn on corn this year, and he's never done that, ever. It's always been a rotation of corn and beans. So, yeah, the idea of more corn so we can sell it to the ethanol plants so they can sell it to California that is going to be all electric vehicle by 2035 doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Now, you said you support ethanol in the vehicles you drive. Do you know if any corn from your fields is sold to any ethanol plants?
I believe it is sold, and that is up to my renter to do whatever he feels is his crop. We're a flexible lease with him. I really don't have a problem with ethanol. I do have a problem with the fact that we think we need to send it to California. There's been speculation, and I can't even tell you the source, but there's been speculation that if we start selling a lot of ethanol to California, the price of ethanol in Iowa will go up 50 cents a gallon.
And although you say you don't have a problem with ethanol, do you have a problem with the concept of picking winners and losers, and that Summit is asking this board to pick a handful of ethanol plants to be the winners and landowners to be the losers?
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
First of all, it's not addressing any point that she made in her testimony, and Mr. Jorde is simply testifying and building a whole bunch of facts that he wants to put in there into the question.
Mr. Jorde?
Well, she absolutely testified about ethanol with other questioners, so I don't see why that's not fair game.
Do you have a... Can you move on to the next question, Mr. Jorde?
Sure. Do you think it's part of this board's purview to determine if the profits of ethanol plants are superior to landowner rights?
But it is going to be the board that has to decide that, I guess. I believe that ethanol has its place. I believe there's an out for it as far as ways to reduce the carbon intensity. And I do believe they can do that at the site in most instances. My problem with the fact is that this is going to take a lot of land. It's going to take farmers that have owned land for years out of their expansion projects, out of their homes that they want to build in separate areas. Cities are not going to be allowed to expand, or their development's going to be inhibited, maybe on one side of town versus another. The safety issues, which I'll let my sister take care of, are there. The board has the ultimate decision to grant the permit, and then grant the permit with or without eminent domain. I do hope and pray that they understand that it feels like the small farmers were targeted when they drew their desktop maps, because the farmers that have testified and the landowners that have testified, for the most part, are not big corporate farms. We are small farms. We have one parcel. There was a number of us that had one parcel, 2 or 3. The land's been in our family for years. It's not something like we're going to go sell it for development. It's the legacy, it's the heritage. Again, unless you've grown up on a farm, you do not understand what it is to have that land that your father, that your grandmother, grandfather, great-grandpa, whatever, farmed. Blood, sweat, and tears. Literally, blood, sweat, and tears. There were years before crop insurance that if they had hail, we ate potato soup because all of the beef cows had to be fed, and he didn't have the corn to feed them, so you sold them, and you'd start over the next year. That is something as a child you'll never forget, because they had to pay the taxes no matter what. And so to pay the taxes and pay the bills, medical bills or whatever the case may be, that is something that is hard to understand.
Would you agree, though, that apparently there are people that have grown up on farms that have signed
Yes, I do understand that, and I wonder if they understood. Literally, again, I know a couple people in Shelby County that wishes they hadn't.
But let's just assume, for instance, they did understand. Is ultimately what you're getting at here, ma'am, is that landowners should have the choice to either say no thank you or okay.
Yep, the bumper sticker on my car says that. It's my land or my farm, my choice.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. We appreciate your testimony, and thank you for your patience as we dealt with objections. We'll take a quick 15-minute break. Before we do, Mr. Jorde, who are we coming back to?
Well, it probably makes the most sense to finish up with Miss Hanson.
Okay.
And let's see. And then I think we might go to Mr. Fentro, who will be virtual.
Okay. And then did you have additional information or a question about tomorrow? You just alluded to it earlier. I just wasn't sure what you were looking for.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Dublinski and I just talked briefly, but when last week, I think it was like 8 p.m. on Wednesday of last week, it was discussed, or it was told to us that we would have the room for the facility for this week. We scrambled, were able to put together 26 persons. We got through 13 yesterday, which I think was a record. I've got 13 people down today, I think. Unfortunately for Thursday, I've been able to get one commitment virtual, and so the question that I have is it worthwhile to have everyone here tomorrow for a single witness when I think it appears pretty obvious we're going to have to find a couple dates sometime in the future to get through the balance of my folks, and then there are also some non-intervening Exhibit H folks that also still have to go. So it's kind of more of a question. I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else has input, that's fine. We'll have to discuss as a board. If the landowner is available tomorrow, and it's the only time that landowner is available, it's worth my time to listen to a landowner. Go ahead, Mr. Dublinski.
Yeah, I am still concerned that, I certainly appreciate Mr. Jorde getting us full schedules for yesterday and today, but obviously there was even more notice, really a full week's notice for tomorrow, and having one when there allegedly are this still relatively sizable pool of people, we certainly incurred the ire of the board on much shorter notice over a holiday weekend for that, and this has been known and foreseeable, and I don't know how we do anything about it, but I think we should. But to the extent that it is what it is, and there's only one person available for tomorrow, and if that's how it's going to be, I guess my question to Mr. Jorde is, since that person is virtual, is there any chance that person would be available this evening, and we can pick that up? Because I do agree with Mr. Jorde. It doesn't make a lot of sense for everyone to come back for just one person. So I would hope we either find a way to get more people tomorrow, find a way to fit that person in tonight, or I think if worst came to worst, we would probably be willing to waive that person if they're willing to forego their live testimony and stipulate to the admission of the testimony and exhibits. Although I think that is unfortunate. If the board wants us to come here, if the witness wants to come here, we'll certainly be here in the morning. We will be here whenever the board tells us to be here. But I want to put those thoughts out there on different ways to handle it and the concerns we have about each.
Okay.
So can I just respond to that? This individual isn't saying I can only go on Thursday. They just couldn't go anytime sooner, and it would be virtual, so it could be done in the future. And I just am suggesting that given there are a fair amount of people that even if they all showed up tomorrow, we still wouldn't be done tomorrow, that it might make sense to talk about dates in the future rather than having one person testify tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. On that note, we will likely break for lunch at 12:30 to 1:30. That way it'll be a little bit later than normal. We will also have the ability to dodge an emergency test system and 50 cell phones going off simultaneously. So you can enjoy that over your own lunch. But we will be back in about 15 minutes, around 11:10.